On a Sunday morning in mid-February, I awoke in my dorm room to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was early, or at least it felt really early. My head was pounding. The night before, my friends and I had all gone out to a Valentine's Day themed house party. When I opened my eyes, those friends were still asleep on the small strip of laminate flooring between my bed and my roommates. My shoes, which had previously been white the night before, were stained with splotches of red punch and traces of unidentifiable liquor. I climbed down from my bed as quickly as I could, and, not wanting to disturb anyone, I grabbed my phone and took it out into the hall, where other students were bustling back and forth between the showers and their rooms. The call, it turned out, was from my dad. It was brief. He had bad news. A childhood friend of mine had died the day before. I don't remember what I said in response to that. But after I hung up, I was overwhelmed by the need to cry. The only problem was that I couldn't find a private place to do it. The hallways were busy with life. My dorm room was already stretched to its occupancy limits. What did I do then? I quietly got dressed, walked across campus, and found a building with an unoccupied bathroom where I could let the tears flow. What I'm describing happened half a lifetime ago. Literally. I'm 36 now. I was 18 then, just a freshman in college. I don't think about it as much as I used to, and when I do now, the memory itself appears to me like an object in a museum exhibit. Inanimate, a thing unto itself, separate and independent from the person I am now. Long periods of dormancy can lead us toward the mistaken belief that the past is dead and buried, but all it takes is the right conditions, the right combination of triggers and stimuli to unsettle the ground beneath our feet and remind us that memory is a living, aching thing. That's precisely what happened while watching Lukas Dhont's 2022 film Close, which follows the intimate friendship between Leo and Remy, two adolescent boys whose relationship is fractured by the social pressures of high school and then irreparably broken when Remy unexpectedly dies. It's an understatement to say that Close simply moved me to tears. I cried once, and then again and again and again, until the tears were just kind of slowly seeping out of me. And the easy explanation for this emotional response is that the movie captures an experience I'm somewhat familiar with: the abrupt death of a childhood friend. However, like a lot of people, I can be a poor interpreter of my own feelings, both their origins and their varied meanings. Whenever a movie makes me feel something I don't understand, I often turn to criticism in search of answers. That's how I stumbled upon an essay in Movie Notebook about the movie Close and its depiction of male grief and anguish on screen. Reading it had a clarifying effect, as if the cathartic process that had begun with watching the film was somehow able to arrive at both a satisfying emotional and intellectual conclusion with the aid of the text. So I reached out to the essay's author, poet and culture critic Eileen G'Sell. I'm Matt Jones, and this is another episode of I'm Not Crying. Hi, today I'm here with Eileen G'Sell. How are you doing, Eileen?
I'm good.
Good. And I think you mentioned you are recording in St. Louis. Is that right?
Yes, I am in St. Louis, just north of Forest Park. So for those who know it, it's very historic, designed by the same person who designed Prospect Park in Brooklyn. for those who are familiar with that park. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about male melodrama and crying and cinema.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, I was really excited to find your essay in Movie Notebook, which I enjoy reading.
Can you tell me how you actually came upon it? Because honestly, like, I mean, I remember writing the essay, and it was actually the second essay I had written about Lukas Dhont's Close. And I
Yeah.
also wrote a poem about Lukas Dhondt's Close. So the movie in 2023 had a huge effect on me, like early 2023. And I wrote all of this, including the essay you read early 2023. But honestly, like, I haven't thought about it in so long. So your email was
Sure.
really wonderful because I was like, oh, I should reread this essay. So I just reread it today and I was like, this is pretty good.
I thought it was great. Yeah, I thought it was great.
I had to like rewatch the trailer of Eight Mountains to kind of like, because I only watched that movie once, whereas I watched Close, I think at least twice because I wrote about it multiple times. So I was just curious, like, how did you come across the essay in the first place? Like, what led to that interest?
Sure. Well, I will say, similar to you, Close had a big impact on me. It's one of those movies that I've thought about, and that I've been a little bit desperate to talk about with someone.
Oh, good.
And finding your essay on it that approached it from a male melodrama angle was new to me. And I think it solidified a lot of the things that I felt upon watching it. And I think it, in my opinion, did a really good job about refuting some of the criticism around the movie. So yeah, and I found it just because I've been a movie subscriber for a little while. Yeah. So I like reading the Movie Notebook companion. Yeah.
That's great to hear. I have had so many ideas about other essays I'd like to write for Movie Notebook. It's such a fantastic forum and they're so open for different types of essays, but I just haven't been able to. Like, I mostly write more short form reviews, which are easier to churn out and still gratifying as a writer, but writing a long form review that incorporates scholarship and in my own analysis, when I have the opportunity to do that, it's just wonderful. So I'm really glad you enjoyed it. And I did not have an opportunity to rewatch Eight Mountains. And I did not have an opportunity to rewatch Close since you reached out. I have thought about them, and I've also thought a little bit more about my own tendencies as a viewer to cry or not cry. And I really kind of thought about which films I've seen that made me cry. And I know that you already did an episode on Elephant Man, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So Elephant Man is the one that I saw with trepidation earlier 2025, right after David Lynch had passed away. There was a series of David Lynch films at the Alamo Drafthouse, and we saw a bunch of them. And when I saw Elephant Man, I knew I was going to cry at the end just because I remember watching it as a kid with my mom and then watching it again, I think when I was in college. That was the first time I was a grown up and watched it. But I had never seen it. I don't think I'd seen it on like a big screen, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so it was, I wrote about Elephant Man for the Hopkins Review and David Lynch's depiction of the afterlife. Just because there's certain motifs he has with that in both Mulholland Drive and I think Twin Peaks, not Twin Peaks: The Return, Fire Walk with Me. That one.
Oh, okay.
Fire Walk with Me. And then also Elephant Man. So I know you already did an episode on Elephant Man, so we don't have to talk about that. But that was one that I feel like I don't know, my response was so visceral and it was predictably visceral. But the other one I was thinking about, if you'd be interested in talking about it, would be, if you've seen it, of course, Vittorio De Sica's Umberto D. Have you seen that one?
I have not seen that one. So can you tell me a bit about that?
And I haven't seen that one in over a decade. But that is a film that I can remember when I first saw it. It was when I was a TA for an intro to film class, probably around like 2007. It was a while ago. And it's an Italian neorealist film from 1952, black and white. And it actually is pretty slow moving. But I will say the ending of that movie has stayed with me in a way that it feels like it's almost like a part of me.
Oh,
And I
okay.
remember after the movie ended, seeing a lot of my students crying, specifically male students. And I remember thinking it was kind of fascinating to see so many young men crying in light of the film, which does follow a male protagonist. And it also follows a male protagonist and his dog, which I kind of wonder if maybe that combo has like a
Ah,
particular appeal to certain types of male viewers. I don't want to generalize about all men, but I do remember a lot of young men in the class crying. And I will tell you, Matt, I reread just the plot of Umberto D on Wikipedia today, and just reading the plot, I was like, oh my God, I might cry. Like it was bringing
wow.
it back to me. So I don't know. There's something about that movie. Maybe you should watch it and we could do a future episode, because that one is,
I'm
if you have an emotional response.
I'm completely sold on it. Yeah, yeah. I hadn't heard of it. Yeah, and if you want, I was wondering what do you think made your reaction so visceral to Elephant Man?
I think Elephant Man is a little complicated
Yeah.
because of the fact that I have memories of watching it as a child. And so there's like a certain way, and I wasn't really allowed to watch many adult movies as a child, and I wasn't allowed to even watch many live action films. So the fact that I was allowed to watch something so heavy, I think was part of it. But I think also there are certain films that depict, and actually Mountains also gets into this, and so does Close for that matter. I didn't actually think about this ahead of time, which I should have. But there are certain films that depict the choice to end one's life with a
Hmm.
degree of sensitivity and depth that kind of miraculously avoids the sentimentality or the kind of like easy pathos that often accompanies acts of suicide depicted on screen. And I think that I maybe have a sensitivity to that. And I think that maybe with The Elephant Man, part of how I interpreted the end of that movie, even as a grown up as well, but also when I was a kid, was that he's choosing to leave this world because this is the best it's ever going to be for him. Like he's never
Yeah.
going to be happier. And he knows that the rest of his life is only going to go downhill. I know that other people interpret the film differently. And I'm not saying that my interpretation is correct, but I found that so shocking as a child, and I still find that kind of shocking now. It's deeply sad. But then at the same time, the idea that one has suffered so tremendously, so viscerally as Merrick has in The Elephant Man, it just makes the end of the movie so overwhelming. I also feel like Samuel Barber's Adagio for Strings,
Yeah.
I just think that is one of the most exquisite, sad classical music score. I mean, it's not a score for the film. It does show up in many films, but it's just, I just find it unbelievably moving. I always have. So I think there's that too. But what about for you?
Oh, for me, just in terms of an Elephant Man or in general?
Either. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, something that I've been thinking about, or I guess the reason I started this is because I think I grew up crying at movies, but I'm either doing it more or differently, or I'm just more cognizant of it now. Which is why I got interested in talking to people about it. So I think for me, like a theme that makes me cry in movies is male friendship. So when I found your
Okay.
piece on male melodrama and Close and Eight Mountains, I thought, okay, that totally tracks. And I think there's something about I don't know. There's something about I've tried to articulate it in my own mind about parents, and I guess like anticipated loss is probably the best way I can say it. So there's a moment in the movie Eight Mountains, which I've only seen one time as well, and it didn't hit me near as hard as Close. But there's a moment where I think Pietro, he returns much later as an adult. He's hiking all of these peaks in the Eight Mountains, and he finds a letter, a journal entry his dad had placed up there about the hike that they did when he was a kid. I think the day he got altitude sickness and he couldn't complete the
Yeah.
hike, and he felt
Yeah.
that. So that was like he held on to that as a while, kind of like maybe I disappointed my dad. So, and as an adult, he reads the dad's journal entry, and the dad is basically like, "This was the best day ever." And so I cried really quickly, like 10 seconds in 10, and then done. Like,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eight Mountains, I didn't think it was necessarily a bad film, but I didn't respond to it emotionally in the way that I did with Close. I think part of it was that it just felt a lot more traditional and conservative as I wrote. And so far as like male emotion is not represented in terms of interiority so much as it is represented in these sublime naturescapes that man kind of like is represented by, like the enormity of his emotion and the enormity of his selfhood is represented by the fact that he exists within nature. And so I kind of approached Eight Mountains a little more philosophically, but I definitely, I cry pretty predictably at certain types of scenes in movies, and they're honestly pretty cheesy. And I'm embarrassed that like this is so predictable, but like if someone gets like a standing ovation, like
Okay.
especially if it feels earned or like someone has worked really, like I think it's like it dovetails with like the way I was raised on the myth of meritocracy, this idea that like if you just work really hard, someday everyone will recognize you. So of course Elephant Man had everything. It had like the standing ovation, and it had this like distinct suicide situation. So it had the whole package for me. But as far as like inducing tears, but yeah, I mean, I think that when I can think of movies that aren't even very good, like A Beautiful Mind, where like when I was in high school or college or however old I was when that was in theaters, I don't remember. I think I was a teenager, or maybe a young 20 something. I remember crying just to the end because it was just like the standing ovation. And when I'm actually standing in a standing ovation, and I try to only stand if I actually think I should stand, which can sometimes be hard because sometimes some people are standing around me and I don't actually think that we should be standing. So I just don't usually, unless I totally feel like a total asshole, and then I'll just feel bad. But like if I'm really standing up for a standing ovation, I feel like is warranted, I will often tear up. Like there's something about that collective energy and this feeling of gratitude for what just transpired, whether or not it's on a stage, or usually it's on a stage. It doesn't always have to be, but like that kind of moment, I often feel very, very moved being part of it in the audience, which is pretty cheesy and pretty predictable. I also think like dog people relationships, like relationships with a dog, I'm just completely, this is something that if it's well rendered, I have a hard time not responding to emotionally. And I don't actually think there are that many films that represent the complexity of the relationship between humans and animals really well. Usually like dog movies are kind of like, I don't know, they're made into more like young adult movies or kids movies. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like one of the things that's unusual about Umberto D is that the relationship between the dog and the human is really at the crux of the film. And it's just not done in the same traditional way that you'd usually see it. At least, I mean, I don't think. I mean, the main character is a kind of cantankerous old man. In a lot of ways, he's not very likable, whereas the dog is very likable. And I think that's part of what makes it an interesting movie is that like the two main characters are this like cranky, unlikable old man and his very likable, adorable dog. But of course, classic they're like dynamic. Very close. You just see what I'm saying? So it's like, but I wish there were more great dog movies. Although I would probably just be crying the entire time. Like, especially, even if the dog didn't die, I could imagine crying just knowing that the dog will probably not outlive the human. Because in that way, I don't know if you have any animals, but one of the things I have thought about at length, and I've written about a little bit, although I want to write about it more, is how the act of having a companion animal or a pet, I mean, pet, I don't really like as a word, but if you have an animal that you're really, really close to, there's something really selfless about that because of the fact that you are almost positive you will outlive that animal. So you take care of something, knowing full well you will also say goodbye. Whereas when we have children, that's not the expectation. The expectation is that our children will outlive us, right?
Sure.
So there is something, I mean, it's not as selfless in a kind of way, just because, and I'm not saying that like pet owners can't be selfish. There's all sorts of selfish pet owning. We know that. But like, there's something about taking care of a creature, knowing that it will never take care of you literally. Like, you're not going to be, you're, like, my dog's not going to like find a great assistant living place for me in 30 years or 40 years or something like that.
Right.
But there's something about that. And I think also there's something about the fact that when an animal is in its last stages of life, we don't necessarily know how much they know, if that makes sense.
Sure.
That
Yeah.
kind of makes
Yeah.
it sadder. I feel
What
like
their
there's
awareness
something
of. Yeah.
exactly. Whereas I feel like with a human being, we have the ability through language to actually discuss what it's like, to discuss mortality, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with animals, we can't discuss the mortality. And some people have told me, oh, well, dogs and animals, they don't really suffer because they're not conscious of the fact that they're going to die or something like that. And I don't know. I don't really believe in that metrics for suffering. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like they do suffer, but like, I don't know how, but anyway, it's a tangent.
In their own way. No. That's something that I think about all the time. And it's something that's come up on other episodes is, like we have 2 cats now, but we did have a dog. And he died old age and everything. And that was something that I like after that was having these massive emotional responses to movies that featured animals dying.
I honestly, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh no. Yeah. No. So that in terms of like thinking about their awareness of dying, like something that I've always thought about, and I feel more neutral on it now, not neutral, but better, is that like we had a home, we had like someone come to our house and like administer, like, he had cancer, and like, so he was able to like die in our house. And
that's such a gift. I really wish I had that. I really, my dog had cancer, but he had a stroke in the middle of the park, and the stroke was terrifying because he was having a seizure, and it was awful. It was actually, the anniversary was just Friday, January 9th.
Oh, wow.
So I've been thinking about it. But anyone who's told me they were able to like, be with their pet, be at home, I'm very envious of that. And yet I'm also profoundly grateful that my dog was lucid enough when I had to say goodbye to completely know I was there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like respond to my voice. And like, it was that oh my God, I'm so grateful for that. Yeah, I feel like with, I know what I was going to say. I was going to tell you, after Holden, my dog, died in 2022, it was during Omicron, and there were not a lot of events going on at the time. And I would go to movie theaters and sit like far away from everyone. I usually go by myself and just as a place to be that wasn't my home, because my home felt very haunted by my dog's absence. But what I noticed is that I had to really honestly stop reviewing films for a while, because I stopped trusting my own response. I wasn't crying just at films that reflected like animals or something. I was crying at like spy movies set in World War II. And I was having like this outsized reaction to films where I was like, this is the best film ever. I can't believe how good this film is. And then I rewatch it like a month later, and it was kind of like, what? Like, this film is good, but like, it's not the best World War II movie ever. Like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't actually write that.
Okay. Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah, I can totally relate. Yeah, it wasn't even just animal movies. I was just much weepier when it came to movies. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense though. When you're experiencing loss, it's unpredictable what's going to be like salient, I guess.
Yeah. When was I'm trying to think back, like in COVID, when was the Omicron variant? When was that happening?
So it was really creepy or creepy is not the best word. It was really, I found it especially difficult because of the fact that it was after a lot of Americans had been vaccinated in 2021. And then Omicron reared its head really the first holiday season that a lot of people felt they could safely congregate again, which was
Yeah.
December of 2021. And so, so December of 2021, and then things intensified in early January. And my university, at least, didn't have, I mean, most classes, I think I started the spring term in 2021 on Zoom because of concerns about how quickly Omicron was spreading. But as a result, when my dog had a stroke, I also wasn't able to go into the emergency room with him.
Yeah.
I had to wait. I waited. It was the middle of winter. Waited in the parking lot for like 5 or 6 hours. And
Wow.
fortunately, different people came with me, and I wasn't actually alone that entire time. But yeah, it was definitely a difficult time for anybody facing loss. Just the whole hospital system. Not being able to actually be with your loved one. I'm sure it was similar and much worse in a lot of cases for humans who wanted to be with their human loved ones. But I do think animal-human relationships are important. So I'm curious, like for you, well, when did you see Close, and what about it resonated so much with you? I don't know how old are you,
Yep.
Matt?
I'm 36.
You're 36. Okay, so you're younger than me. And I'm assuming we have different backgrounds, but I think it's really interesting to if you think about why people identify with this movie, because a lot of people have been moved by Close, and I've talked to a lot of
Yeah.
people about the movie because of the poem I wrote about Close, the essays I wrote about it. So what about it for you was so compelling?
Well, I think for me, it represented an aspect of male friendship that in some ways I feel like I never had. But I very much identified, I think, with both of the boys in terms of having that kind of, I don't know, that experience of queerness when you're young and you don't have language for it. And it feels very natural. And then that closing up of that experience, or that closing off of that experience as you get older, because there's so much, and very much the same way, like you hit high school or even middle school, and there's so much pressure to, I think to label whatever behavior you're seeing around your other peers. And I think one of the, do you mind, can I quote your essay to you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
my ego now. Go for it.
So one of the things that really captured for me, as you said, the triumph of Dhont's second film and its obvious superiority to his first lies in how carefully and perceptively Close navigates ambiguity and depicts male anguish, both its strategic repression and reluctant expression. So that being, I think it helped me when I watch Close. I think, oh yeah, there's so many little calculations you're making about how to hide how you're feeling. And I guess in that process, learning subconsciously to not express throughout your life whatever it is you're feeling. So I think it opened up like a total experience memory box for me in terms of thinking about how I approach friendship with men. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did for me as well. I wrote about this not in the piece that you read. I wrote about it in another essay that has more personal narrative that I wrote for the Hopkins Review. But when I was growing up, I was in a lot of ways a consummate tomboy, and I had mostly friends who were boys as a child. And I feel like in my 20s, I was also kind of like the prototypical like cool girl who had all these guy friends and I have kind of a bro-y side. And so there was just like, I don't know, a big expanse of time where I spent a lot of time with men who are my friends. And we had a closeness, but it wasn't based usually on sharing emotions. And I've always found it kind of fascinating how masculine closeness usually isn't via direct expressions of vulnerability, verbally, I should say. Whereas, and I am making some generalizations here, but in my own experience, I feel like I learned how to be friends with women in my 30s. And I think part of it is that I had some really amazing women in my life who kind of taught me how to be friends with women. And I also gained trust because I was bullied a lot by girls as a child. I was a lot more uncomfortable around them, and I didn't trust them as much. I was always afraid they were kind of secretly being nice to my face, but actually were talking about me behind my back. And there is a kind of violence, especially kind of an emotional violence, that a lot of girls perfect.
You're like really pretty. Thank you. So you agree? What? You think you're really pretty?
I don't want to say all girls, but I think in the absence of physical violence, a kind of emotional violence sometimes creeps in, and girls can be absolutely awful to one another. At least a lot of girls were really awful to me when I was young. So I had some friends, very close guy friends, where I felt like we had, like, as a child, like we had kind of like, I don't know, adventures, so to speak, in a way that Remy and Leo do in Close.
Oh yeah.
And like where your imagination is a big part of it. And I do remember, I think it was in first or second grade, I had these two best guy friends that we had like assigned seats on the bus, and I was in the middle, and one of them would sit, I think Mark would sit to my right, and then Gary would sit to my left, or maybe, actually, no, it was the opposite. Mark would sit to my left, Gary would sit to my right, every single day. And one day, I don't know why, Mark was like, why are you sitting next to Gary? Do you like him? Do you have a crush on him? And I was like, Mark, these are our assigned seats. Like, we've been sitting in this configuration for like the entire year. I don't have a crush. I don't have a crush on Gary. And I remember he kept saying that. And I remember being like, wait, if these are my best friends. Like, as soon as I have a crush on one of them, as soon as like romance enters the equation. I mean, I was like 7 or 8, but once that happens, like, you can no longer be friends. Like, I had this understanding even when I was a very young child, right? And I think that's similar to what Leo and Remy are kind of realizing, is that like, if one of them has any kind of feeling that may be more than platonic, even if it's not expressed, it kind of destroys it, right?
Yeah.
Which is so sad and so tragic. And I feel like one of the things that's beautiful about Close is that there is a queerness to their relationship, but it doesn't necessarily have to be labeled. Like, I could imagine I could totally imagine Leo and Remy growing up into, like, let's say both of them grow up, and, you know, both of them could grow up and be attracted to women. And that doesn't necessarily mean they had any less of a kind of like queer texture to certain parts of their friendship, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
But I could also totally imagine one of them growing up, or both of them growing up and identifying as queer. So I think the movie has done so well that it feels like, okay, there are so many layers of intimacy, and the way that we're inclined to label certain types of physical intimacy as sexual or not sexual is really predicated on all sorts of factors beyond one's control. Like, for example, whether or not someone is through puberty.
Yeah.
Right? Because like Leo and Remy are not through puberty. And I feel like especially Leo is so kind of frail and feminine looking in a lot of ways, very androgynous looking. And I love the fact that he's the one who's actually becomes the bully because he's trying to protect himself, you know? I related a lot to Leo as a character. And I think it's because even though I was bullied a lot in grade school, I also developed the ability to bully myself. And I still feel a lot of shame. I feel a lot of shame for the bullying that I did as a kind of protective measure as a youth. Most of it was not when I was 13. I think most of it was probably when I was younger. But I remember it so vividly. And I also remember the desire to fit in so vividly that I identified with Leo a lot. And I remember when Remy, of course, suddenly becomes, you know, no longer part of the movie because he's gone, I felt a deep anger at Leo's character, but I also felt the anger at myself. Like, I did not feel like if this makes sense, like I didn't feel sorry. I mean, I did feel sorry for Leo, but I also felt angry. And
Yeah.
after I saw the movie, my friend, we saw it in San Francisco, and I was visiting my friend. She's around my age. We're both in our 40s now. I think we were both in our early 40s when we saw the movie. She was like, well, Leo was only doing his best. He was doing the best that he could do. And she was kind of like exonerating him because he's a kid. And I was like, I don't exonerate him. He was old enough. He knew what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it anyway. And so I was actually very hard on him as a character. I think because I was hard on myself. I was remembering moments in my own life where I knew I was bullying. I knew I was being cruel, and I chose to do it anyway. And I think that's something that like still haunts me. Like just knowing that I was capable of that, or that I am capable of that. And I think the movie represents that so well.
Oh yeah, I think it absolutely, and I'd say yeah, I probably relate most to Leo, and that might be because we're still clinging to his perspective throughout the majority of it.
That's true. Yeah.
But I did definitely Remy resonated a lot too about just kind of that he's like the kid who really can't force himself into the new mold at a new school to take on new, like that was me too. I thought, oh, I can't just be different. Like I'm, I can't jump into a new hobby and like join the hockey team. I'm like totally stuck. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I could, like, I think I'm the kind of person, I think I could have gotten, I would have put the skates on. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
like
sure,
I would have put
sure.
the skates on. You know what I mean? I would have done it. I would have put, I feel like, yeah, I feel like there are certain ways in which I was very adaptive as an adolescent. I was very adaptive, but at the same time, that adaptivity can sometimes come with a cruelty, or with or even with, if not cruelty, then a kind of like deception in terms of like,
Sure.
And I feel like when I was very lucky, I think, insofar as when I started high school, it was when like, there was a lot of subcultural energy around like alternative music and grunge music. And there was like, I was kind of on the heels of the Riot Girl movement, where it was like cool to be countercultural and edgy. And I didn't know any of this existed. I was completely ignorant to anything even remotely countercultural. And I was like kind of passing, if you will, in this kind of preppy mold. But I was never really good at it, but I could do it. And I did in adolescence. And then once I started high school and I knew there was this alternative, and at the time it was kind of literally called like alternative culture, or like, that to me was life-changing when I realized I didn't have to actually fit into, and I've never gone back. In a way, like as soon as I realized that was an option for me, I was like, this is where I belong. I never looked good in those polo shirts. I never, so.
Oh yeah. I flirted with polo shirts as well. Yeah. Sometime doubling them up to have the collar under the collar. Yeah.
There was nothing about any of that felt true to me. But yeah, Close is a really good movie also in terms of how it shows like different types of people wrestling with loss, and that people don't all grapple and in the same ways.
Yeah. I think you wrote about that in the piece I read from Mubi, and I was thinking about the scene of when Remy's dad, they're having dinner and he's hearing Leo's older brother talk about his future. And Remy's dad has this breakdown at the table that like, it felt totally relatable. Yeah.
Yeah. It felt very real.
Yeah,
and I think also what felt very real is the father, I think his name is Peter, the father's almost like knee-jerk embarrassment. Like, I'm sorry. Like, and like his need to kind of like remove himself from the space, as though his vulnerability is like a bomb about to go off, like something that other people can't be around. And I have a deep sadness about that. I think that like, there are so many things that are awful about sexism and patriarchy and moving through the world in a body that is that is identifiably female. There's so many things that are treacherous about that. But at the same time, if a woman bursts into tears in that kind of situation, there is likely to be other women gathering around her and a kind of like collective mourning or a kind of like immediate consolation. Whereas I think that men are socialized or sometimes forced to suffer on their own in a way that's ostensibly supposed to have dignity or be a sign of strength, but is actually like extremely debilitating in a lot of cases. And I think in some ways, I've written about this. I wrote about this in my other close piece. Like, I feel like, I don't know if it's because I was raised in the Midwest and there were certain Midwestern values of self-reliance or toughness that I internalized. I don't know if it's because I had a lot of guy friends as a child. And in order to actually have friends who were boys, I had to almost like be tougher as a girl. Like, and also because I was a really small girl, I was always like the smallest one in the class. And so people always expected me to be like the least tough. And so it's almost like I had to outdo everybody.
Oh, sure.
In terms of like toughness, which was ridiculous. Like the amount of stuff that I withstood. And I remember so many times as a little girl being in horrible pain and not crying and just being like, just forcing myself not to cry and being like, I am a pillar of strength right now. This is, I represent something bigger than myself. And I thought about my own suffering in these huge, grandiose terms, which is kind of obnoxious, frankly. But I think I was doing that because I was just really wanted to fit this mold. And I really wanted to show people how tough and resilient I was. And I'm relieved that even though I still have some of that in me, I feel like I've learned that it's okay to cry. I've learned that it's okay to be vulnerable. I've learned that it's okay to be emotional and be consoled.
Yeah.
And I think that, and if I was in a male body or if I identified as a man, I think it would be harder for me to learn that because I don't think there would be as many mentors teaching that. I don't know if that's been your experience, but that's something I thought of.
I think even anecdotally, and then there's this, that I've written about it a bit. There was this like multi-decade long project in the UK called Mass Observation, where they were just gathering like piecemeal anthropological, sociological study. And one of the things that they did in 1950 was they did a survey on what made men and women cry in the cinema. And the responses were very gendered. And a lot of the men, what they responded to, what made them cry was seeing other men like fighting off tears, fighting off emotion and having that resonate, like them being able to recognize like, oh, I have to do that too. And I've had that come up with other guests I've interviewed. So I think, like thinking back to when the dad cries at the dinner table of like, like it immediately like flood of memories of like sometimes if you don't really have a private place to cry, it is that idea of seeing someone like choke back their emotions that feels very overwhelming.
That makes sense because it's kind of like in a lot of ways it's an act of mandated masochism in a way because there's something painful about it and yet it's mandated. And so, I mean, this is something I'm very outspoken about as a feminist. Whenever I'm talking to anyone who seems like skeptical of feminism, one of the things I say is that to me, at least, feminism's not just about how fucked up patriarchy is or how fucked up women are treated. It's also about how a lot of the attitudes around masculinity hurt men, like hurt especially boys and adolescent men. And I have you seen the movie? This is actually kind of related. What is it called? I think it's called Early 90s. It was like Jonah Hill's first movie, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. I wrote about that movie when it came out. It also had a huge effect on me, not only because I grew up in the 90s, but also because I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, but I definitely responded to a lot of the setting, even though I didn't grow up in Southern California. But the way that the youngest kid, I think his name's Mikey, the way that the youngest boy who's kind of prepubescent and is like constantly having to prove himself, I related to a lot, even though I'm not a guy. And so but I was thinking about how that movie did a brilliant job showing how toxic masculinity also injures boys and men. And it's something that we don't talk about enough and we don't see enough of. I think there's just this assumption that like, well, you know, boys/men are like inherently like this. And I feel like, well, no, like they're like this because they're rewarded for being like this. And when they're vulnerable, they're not rewarded. They're punished socially and otherwise. It's like there could even be physical violence. Like you could be physically assaulted by another man or boy for being vulnerable, which is something that that doesn't happen among women. I mean, other types of violence certainly do, but like, you know, I've never been afraid as a girl or woman that if I started to cry or show emotion that like someone was going to jump me, like another girl.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? Like that's just not going to happen. Whereas for a lot of boys and men that totally could, you know, totally could, which I just think it's really important to think about ways to be empathetic with people who are not in the same kind of body as you. And I think that there's advantages to doing that.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that is one of the real reasons that I love Close so much. Is because I think it's showing that in a nuanced way, like how you start to move away from that as an adolescent or that socialization process in its earliest stages. And it just feels in some ways to me when I watch it, like inevitable and inescapable for Leo to go away from Remy.
It's so sad. It's so sad. It does such a good job showing how it's not any one person. It's not like you can blame this on any one person. It's not like there's one person at the school who's making everyone's life miserable. That is rarely the case. I mean, obviously there can be, you know, supernal bullies who just really make life hard. But I do feel like usually it's much more complicated than that. And I found Leo's process of healing and process of like escaping his emotions also really interesting. Like I loved the hockey scenes. And I also love the casting. I can't remember the actor's name who's cast as Leo, but he's such a little guy. You know, it's like when he's extraordinary.
There were just scenes of him like when he attends the concert after Remy's gone and he goes to the concert anyway, and just so many long lingering shots on his face to where I thought he's so expressive, it's just really incredible. I think for someone his age.
You know what would be really interesting? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. No. So it made me think about like those were also scenes where it was like Leo interacting with and reaching out to Remy's mom after Remy was gone. Those were like the heaviest hitters for me. But what were you gonna say?
Those scenes. I just had this thought, and it was like a thought that actually filled me a little bit with terror. Okay, and I was thinking, I haven't seen that actor. I'm going to actually look him up right now. I haven't seen that actor who played Leo in any films since then where maybe he's gone through puberty. I mean, I know when this film was shot, it doesn't seem like he's really gone through puberty. He's still quite almost like a gamine. His body does not look like he's finished puberty. And his name is Eden Dambreen. Even his name, Eden, feels somewhat androgynous. So with Eden Dambreen, I just had this terrifying thought. Like, what if we saw a film with him in it now where he's older? And what if he's like no longer as like facially expressive? What if his face doesn't do because you're right, there's so many long lingering close-ups of his face where he's not saying anything. There's not actually a lot of dialogue in the film. Like his face does a lot of the work. And I just had this horrible thought of like, oh my God, like what if he gets older and he kind of like unconsciously learns to subdue the parts of his face that actually respond to all this stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I think it is something, I don't think it's a conscious choice. Like, I don't think that 14-year-old guys are like, today I'm going to work on, not quivering my brow when I feel like
Sure.
like I don't think that's something that's like trained. I think it's just something that's like absorbed, right?
Yeah, like maybe this socialization process will also extend to his acting, the way that he portrays
Yes,
being.
like just the way that his face responds to
You're right.
stimuli. Yeah.
Yeah. He's just got this like really, it's like an open face of like, he's like wonder and awe and like, I don't know. It's maybe
wonder
that does go away. Yeah.
I wonder, awe, sadness, embarrassment. Like there are so many emotions that are reflected on his face. And I'm not saying it's impossible to have a demonstrative face as a man. It just, a lot of times that goes away. And what's interesting also, I don't know if there are any studies on this. I think it would be fascinating. Like, to what extent is that true in terms of like demonstrations of emotions? To what extent is that true for facial demonstrations for men that identify as straight versus men who identify as queer? Do queer men, are they able to kind of hold on to more like facial emotions? I mean, I feel like anecdotally, I feel like I know gay men who are just as repressed or just barely show any emotion on their face at all. But I also know gay men and queer men who have a lot of emotional demonstrativeness. And I do know straight men also who have more emotional demonstrativeness. But I think I think that's fascinating. Like, to the extent to which, like, how are our emotions encouraged when they're not necessarily verbal or discouraged? Right?
Sure. Yeah. I guess I'm thinking now that, Leo's face in the movie, it's kind of his resting face feels just very open and sincere and malleable. Whereas if I think about like my resting face now, I think I often look like I'm completely checked out. Like if I'm just,
Oh, wow. See, I feel like I just have like a very demonstrative face, but I look angry really easily, which I don't. Some of that just comes with aging, but I think also some of it comes with just like, I am actually very judgmental and I do feel indignant a lot of the time. So it's usually like on my face. And I think as a teacher, because I've been teaching now for about 20 years and I'm certainly have not perfected this, but one of the things I really try to do is temper the face of judgment because it makes everyone else feel horrible about themselves. But I have kind of like a Disney villain face. Like the Disney, like there's the Disney princess and there's the Disney villain. And I feel like the female Disney villains have a very demonstrative faces, which in some ways is great, but it also it can get you in trouble very easily.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I think you can definitely get in trouble.
I've had the opposite described to me. I guess my wife will tell me that my face and the expression of my voice will be quite impassive because when I do work from home and I'm on like a Zoom conference call, I'll get off of it and she'll be like, you need to smile more and like alter your voice so that like your coworkers don't think that you hate them or you're completely disinterested. So yeah, I know that I tend to read often as like I have to remind myself.
You do have a very placid countenance. I've never met you in person, but you have a very placid, even-keeled way, like your way of speaking, your cadence. But you don't seem checked out to me. You seem engaged.
I'm checked in. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like but the thing is like, so much of this is beyond our control, right? So like you could feel like deep fury or emotion or consternation or curiosity, and I might not necessarily pick up on it immediately, and
sure. Yeah.
And that could be a disadvantage, right? Whereas for me, it's like the opposite, where I'm just kind of like it's someone is going to know exactly how I feel unless I put an incredible amount of energy into tempering it.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But I think there are definitely advantages and disadvantages to both. And I think part of it also is probably like just how we model the adults we grew up with, if that makes sense.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Like my mom is like totally histrionic half the time. So compared to my mom, I'm like a stoic and people don't believe me. It's like there's, but if you're around one type of behavior, it's almost impossible for it to have no effect on you at all. right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't think has Lucas Dhont done another movie since Close? I don't think he has.
I don't think so.
I mean,
I will. I'm excited to see what he does next.
me too. I mean, he's got to
Yeah.
be. He's still really young. He's like probably 34
Oh,
or 35, and I hope I hope he continues to make movies involving like these kind of liminal spaces in terms of adolescence or characters going through some kind of transition, because I think he's really good at that. And I think
yeah.
also I think that he's a really good director thinking about male vulnerability, not just children, like not just boys vulnerability, but male vulnerability. And there really just isn't a lot out there that does that well. I mean, in the piece I wrote for Movie Notebook, I write about like the male melodrama category. I didn't come up with
Mhm.
that category. It was created, like a scholar wrote about it, and I cite her in the piece. But, Clint Eastwood movies are maybe the most paradigmatic male melodrama, where you rarely
Mm.
see the men actually break down in tears. You usually see other people cry for them.
I don't think it's nice, you laughing. See, my mule don't like people laughing. It's the crazy idea you're laughing at him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what's kind of melodramatic about it. And I argue that Close is not really a melodrama, because we do see the boys and the men cry. We do see
Yeah.
them be emotional, which is really important. But at the same time, like, I do like a lot of those Clint Eastwood films. Like, I also
Sure.
feel, I do feel like, I mean, Sean Penn is in these movies like where Mystic River, where he's just like so tortured and he just like wants to dissolve, but he can't. Like, there is something. Clint Eastwood is really good at that type of film of like reflecting the violence of male repression.
Oh,
Um,
I feel like he's like the archetype pretty much now. Yeah.
yeah, and I like a lot of these films. I really do. I think in my 20s, I also kind of like, I don't know, there's something about toughness and resilience that was very compelling to me as a young woman that isn't as compelling anymore. And I
Mm.
don't know exactly why. Maybe it's just because I started making friends with more women. But yeah, in my 20s, I wrote a lot of poems that were like odes to like Clint Eastwood, or like I watched a lot of war movies. I
Okay.
think I was just trying to escape my own sadness. And I think one way to do that was to um, submerge myself in, like, I don't know, the anguish of Jason Bourne.
Sure. That's a good
Which
title. Yeah.
I love the Bourne movies. I love the
Yeah.
Bourne movies. I wrote one essay about, I think, Jason Bourne, like the last of the franchise that had Matt Damon. I
Mhm.
wrote about that, but I love those movies. But yeah, I think I just kind of needed this escape from my own loneliness. And so I kind of glommed onto these characters in my 20s. And now
Yeah,
I'm a
and they
little bit more
certainly
sensible. Yeah.
and they make it look really cool. If I'm thinking about the Bourne series, or guys like Jason Statham.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah, they
absolutely.
they can suffer pretty much the worst things you can throw at them, and still come out, relatively unscathed.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the whole point. And the thing is, like, and I will say, like, I feel so ambivalent saying this, but I still find this so seductive, Matt. It's like I was just thinking about like Jason Bourne falling in, like, he falls off the roof. I think this is the second one. He falls off the building. He's under the water, and we think he's dead. And then we hear like Moby, and all of a sudden he's like swimming and he's alive again. And
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just like, yes, he's back, and like completely unscathed. He's gonna be fine. I mean, it's obviously, this is a myth. This is a myth. Like, the idea that all of this violence and all of this injury, emotional, physical, psychological, etc., the idea that an individual man can endure all of this and just like blithely swim away, this is not true. We know this is not true. Like Jason Bourne would probably be beating his wife somewhere. I hate to say that. But like this is he'd have a serious addiction, right? Like
Yeah.
he'd have a gambling problem. I mean, I hate to say this, but like in real life, this is so not true. And yet this archetype, I still find it so seductive, even though I know it's not true. So I think that's also kind of fascinating. Like it's so seductive.
Oh, I mean, I love it. I think there are Jason Statham movies that are still coming out that I watch kind of cheering like for, even though I know that they're not great. But when I was thinking,
what's your favorite one? Tell me what's your favorite one. I should probably see one to see how I respond.
The most recent one that I really enjoyed was The Beekeeper.
I protect the hive. When the system is out of balance, I correct it.
Because Jason Statham is always playing, he's playing jobs that he's never actually doing, but they serve as the broader kind of heavily hammered metaphor for the kind of ass kicking that takes place.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get a sense of what you're talking about now. Okay.
I was thinking about like, when you're talking about Jason Bourne, like what would the kind of A24 treatment of that be? And there's a show called Patriot. I don't know if you ever saw it, but it is very much about a guy who's in the intelligence space for the US, and he's really miserable and sad and completely struggling with anything going right. Yeah.
I'm just looking it up now. Yeah, no, I could see myself enjoying this. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I find this archetype very seductive, even though it's also very troubling, and we know it's not real. We know that like this guy wouldn't actually perpetually kick ass forever, right? He would have like debilitating, crippling psychological issues, addiction, etc. Like it doesn't work out this way. You know what I was also thinking about in preparing for this conversation, and I was thinking about this when looking at the story of Eight Mountains. One of the things that I thought could have been really amazing in Eight Mountains, it wasn't totally explored, but like there's really a class difference between the two characters, the two buddies. Like one of them is from a much more like upper middle class family, and then I think Bruno is the one who's from a more working class background. He's the one that like builds the house and like does all the manly stuff. He's also the one that ends up, tragically dying, and we don't actually see that on screen, but like there's that implication of him disappearing into the wilderness in a kind of way that reminds me a little bit of Chris McCandless. You know what I'm talking? I was also very moved by his story, Into the Wild. And so like there's that element there, and I feel like with what's going on now in the United States, there have been so many deaths of despair, especially among working class and lower middle class men. And there's a lot of conversation about like, men are in crisis, et cetera, et cetera. And like, I understand how some people would say, well, men still run the world and they're not in crisis. But I think in a lot of cases, it can be a class issue where, yes, well, men run the world, but the men who run the world are the 0.1% of men or 0.001% of men. They're not actually most men. And I do think there's something about the struggle of men who, and Jason Bourne could actually be thrown into this category in some ways, the struggle of men who are valued for their like physical stamina or their toughness, like their physical ability to withstand or endure. Yeah. That's a minority of men in terms of like the labor force. Let's just put it that way. Like there's, what I'm saying?
It's a total fantasy. Yeah, to say what we admire are the men who worked the 12-hour shifts in factories and they didn't complain, and I feel like,
but there's a kind of trace of that. There's a trace of that in Jason Bourne. There's a trace of that in a lot of these movies where this guy is valued for virtues, like very masculine virtues that in reality are not rewarded in late capitalism at all, right? And I think there's a way that like that kind of gets mapped onto it. I'm not surprised that we have more and more protagonists in more and more movies and TV shows where people are, or the writers and the producers of the shows are challenging these archetypes in some ways, because I do think, like, I don't know, we don't live in an age where physical stamina is actually being rewarded in any real way. Like late capitalism does not reward that. I mean,
Yeah.
does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. I was thinking in terms of like the maybe primarily if you're thinking about the voices coming from like right-wing spaces, the people valorizing like physical stamina and, you know, male strength are mostly doing like podcast jobs or sitting at your computer jobs.
100%. Yeah. It's like, it's completely hypocritical. It's like, you know, it's almost kind of hilarious to think about like how little these men actually need to be jacked at all. Like, it's all performance. There's nobody's working in a field. Nobody's cutting down trees. It's not real. And yet it's still so important in this like fantasy of what it means to be a man. I mean, and the thing is, like, obviously there's the flip side. There are all sorts of fantasies about what it means to be a woman, which is usually the opposite in all sorts of ways. But I do think, I like maybe like 10 years ago, I wanted to write a book called Jacked, because I was thinking about how the word jacked, like, can mean more than one thing. It can mean like being like conspicuously muscular in a kind of intimidating way, but it can also mean like having something stolen from you.
Yeah.
Like something, you know, being jacked. And so I kind of see like the jacked man as like a physical representation of like something was stolen from me, but I'm going to do everything I can to kind of like get it back in a way that's actually superficial, because it's not really contributing to like productivity. Does that make sense? Like, historically, like jacked men existed because they were like building shit. I mean, I'm being reductive, but like, you know.
Yeah, it was utilitarian jackedness. Whereas now I think even with casting, you see like people who are just jacked for every role. And I think I don't know, like you don't need to be that jacked. But if you ever do write that, there is a niche infamous product that I myself took that was around for a while called Jacked. And the E, instead of an E, it was a backwards 3. It was a pre-workout supplement that was pulled from the market because it was, I think, you know, filled with various pseudo amphetamines.
You know, I think someone sent me a picture of that exact product and was like, oh, this could go in your book. The book had the word neoliberal way too much, Matt. This is one of the reasons why when I was actually trying to do like the elevator pitch for this book, so many people were like, this book is way too like philosophical, like Marxist, it's too lefty. And also, I think a lot of people had the relevant criticism, like, you are not a jacked guy. How are you going to write this book? And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. That never occurred to me. like I don't represent what this book is about. Maybe that's, you know what, Matt, maybe that's why I wrote a book about lipstick instead. I was going to write the book about being jacked. Instead, I decided to write a book about feminine performance. I mean, I am really interested in gender performance, and I think that gender is a performance in a lot of ways. But I think that, you know, in some ways, Jacked 10 years ago as an idea would not have been a very different book from the lipstick book that I wrote. It's just that writing the lipstick book, it's like a much easier sell. People are like, oh, she likes lipstick. She's a lady. She's writing about gender and lipstick. But I feel like I felt the same kind of fascination with like male performance or performance of masculinity, because and in a lot of ways, I mean, especially like taking like certain types of supplements, it's way worse than like putting makeup on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The supplement space, totally. Yeah. Unregulated. A lot of very strange advice out there. I think if we're moving back into just talking about like men and like male influencers now, like how you should be, there's a lot of really weird, detrimental advice, not only like in emotional territory, but in like your actual physical body. Yeah.
Oh God. I totally believe you. I've had several male students write research papers about like the marketing of fitness supplements or the marketing of different types of products targeting young men. And they're very in some ways strategic and predatorial, even in terms of making young men feel bad about themselves. And I really love, though, the fact that like I have had straight identified young men in my class who want to research this, who don't find it emasculating to actually research this. Because I think when I was growing up, I feel like if a straight guy, especially kind of a bro-y straight guy, wanted to research anything related to gender, there would be this assumption that's in some way it's kind of emasculating. Oh no, women are the ones who worry about that. That's not something men should be worried about. But I do feel like there's a slightly more open attitude among Gen Z men about like thinking about the detriments of this. Like I've also had like bro-y young men write about gambling advertisements and how incredibly fraught they are. And a lot of times gambling influencers also happen to be jacked.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of crossover there. Yeah.
Yeah, which is also kind of strange. Like, it's not like online gambling burns calories or muscle. I mean, I feel like it's like these are not like activities that are actually in any way connected to building bulk. But yet they're kind of conflated in really disturbing ways. I mean, it's funny. It's like, to some extent, I've heard people say, oh, well, now young men are understanding what it's like to like have to kind of mold themselves to achieve a certain physique or achieve a certain appearance. And women have been doing this for decades. And, so now men have to too. And I'm just kind of like, really? Like, if it's bad for women, isn't it also bad for men? Are we really happy that like now young men are encouraged to be just as shallow or superficial? Like, to me, that's just kind of sad. Like, I don't know. Like, there's, I have very competing ideas about this, though. I will say, and the reason I have competing ideas about this is that for so many millennia, for hundreds of years, men were really valued first and foremost for like being a provider and like how much money could they contribute to like the domus or like the household, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like if you look at like, throughout history, if you look at like the husbands and the men that would like be married to absolutely beautiful women, like they didn't have to worry about what they looked like at all. Like there was just kind of like, which I also feel like is not like, that's not ideal either. Like that's the opposite extreme, just like not caring at all and just being like, well, I make a lot of money and that's what's important. I mean, even as recently as the 80s and the 90s, I feel like there were all these TV dads that were just really schlubby and had like ridiculously hot wives.
Oh yeah. That was
just normal.
That was like the sitcom standard. I remember growing up. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like, that's not great either. Like, what does that, does that teach young women, Yeah.
The husband who was kind of like a large second or third child, depending on the dynamic. Yeah,
it just really, it was this like helpless, schlubby husband who's really only useful for like his economic contribution. Like what a depressing, thing to look forward to. But yeah, I don't know. There's so much that's a whole other, that has nothing to do with crying. Or maybe it does, but there's nothing.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Matt, do you have any other things? We've strayed a bit. We've gone into like different archetypes of masculinity, but are there any other things that with Close you wanted to talk about, or with Crying you wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
Well, yeah, maybe my one big thing would be to say, was there any particular scene in the movie that really got to you when you watched Close? Okay,
now I need to think about this. Yes, I think so. Obviously, when we find out that Remy has died by suicide, that's devastating. Like on the bus, that's an absolutely devastating scene. But I actually feel like in some ways I was more moved by the scene where Remy is crying uncontrollably and is like angry. He's like crying at the same time he's kind of like fighting.
Oh yeah.
And when Leo says to him something like, he doesn't say get a hold of yourself, but he has said something like just stop crying. Like just stop. And I felt so much pain in that moment because I identified with it in terms of like telling myself to just stop crying. Just stop. But I also felt like the display of emotion that Remy showed was just grueling. Like just I think that was the scene that when I think about it, I still remember the most as far as just feeling like something being sliced through me. What about for you?
I mean, I think, I like, and you, in terms of you mentioning that, I think, it's interesting. We get that moment where he tells him to stop crying. And then we have that scene later after Remy's gone to where they have, the school counselor there and they're actually talking about the act of crying, about it being okay. But the big one for me, like, and I probably cried like the last half hour of this, like it just didn't, it was kind of like a low boil. But when Leo goes to Remy's house, and I think the mom gives him a glass of water and they're kind of just standing there looking at each other in the kitchen. That was really heavy because I think he has this, and I'm probably projecting like on my own experience, but I feel like he has this fascination with Remy's mom in terms of like, she is an anchor for him of, having their friendship, like a remaining anchor point, but also trying to feel out what she thinks or maybe grapple with whatever shame he feels. Okay,
I'm going to bring it full circle now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Remy's family have a dog?
Yeah.
Okay, that also really got to me when we see the dog come out of the house, which is such a happy thing, but we know that inside the house, Remy's not going to be there.
Yeah.
That
got to me too.
That was so hard because like there's a way it's like you see the dog whose tail is wagging and is happy to see Leo, and the dog being happy to see Leo, it should make things better hypothetically because it's like this reminder that there's still this like loving, happy creature in the home. But in some ways it almost makes it worse because it's like the dog can still be happy seeing Leo and it seems like everything's normal, but actually it's not. He's going to go inside the house and his best friend's not going to be there. Also seeing the room, being inside Remy's room was really difficult. Being inside with Leo, like kind of like there are all these memories there that they have, of course. What doesn't he ask for something, or doesn't the mom give Leo something from the room?
The mom, I know she says like that she's kind of looked everywhere throughout the room. And I guess we're supposed to take that as maybe that she's looked for some sort of sign as to why he would. Yeah. And she tells him like, you can take anything you want. And I think, he just he's feeling so much guilt, obviously, that the mom, and I almost wonder, she seems like she is obviously very curious, but you can't really interrogate a 13-year-old too much.
Yeah,
but she seems like desperate, like quiet desperation to know if he has any insight as to what happened.
That's right. Yeah. And I remember I did have a lot of emotion during the scene too, because I remember thinking, it's your fault, Leo. And like, obviously it's not his fault 100%, but that was just like, there was a part of me that was like, it is his fault. Like he feels like it's his fault. And in some ways it kind of is. Like, it's obviously much more complicated than Leo, but like, I do feel like this is a whole other discussion, but like a lot of movies do not take the ability of children to harm each other seriously enough. Like they don't let kids have agency. And I understand that kids are kids. And I understand that, I mean, I'm a very anti-carceral person, so I don't think that kids who commit horrible crimes should be thrown into prison, blah, blah, blah. But I still think that like, at the end of the day, like kids can really hurt other kids. Like they can, and they can do it on purpose. And I don't think that just being like, you know, a prepubescent 13-year-old means that you're just totally off the hook. And I think that part of what the movie did so well is show us how like Leo feels that guilt, and he should feel like it makes sense that he feels that guilt. And it also makes sense that the mom kind of like that Remy's mom is curious about what happened, and that he doesn't want to tell her, right? He doesn't want to tell this maternal figure he looks up to that like, oh, I'm the reason, or I contributed to your son's, undoing, or I contributed to his sadness. I mean, obviously it's not Leo's fault on its own, but I could totally understand why he thinks it is. And I don't remember in the movie if he actually does take anything from the room, but just being in that room was absolutely devastating. And I think that I wrote about this in the movie piece, but there's no casket, there's no funeral. We don't get the kinds of scenes that usually films rely on. And I was really grateful for that, because I feel like it's too easy. And a lot of times those tears feel really cheap to me, even though I might still respond. And I think that this film does not traffic in that kind of sentimentality at all, which is one of the reasons why it's one of the reasons I wanted to defend it. I couldn't believe that there were criticisms of the film being melodramatic, of Close being melodramatic. I was like, it's restrained.
I didn't get that at all in the movie. Yeah.
It was just ridiculous. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the whole essays, because I was thinking, this is not a melodramatic film. This is rather audience members so unaccustomed to seeing male emotion on screen that they kind of have this knee-jerk reaction. And the thing is, these were film critics across a variety of gender identities. This was not just one type of film critic who said this movie was melodramatic. And I was like, no, it's not. So yeah, I mean, hopefully people who listen to this podcast have already seen Close, because otherwise we've had so many spoilers. And one of the things that was really moving for me was not knowing,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My hope is kind of maybe people have seen it and want to learn more about it.
Yeah. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah. This was great. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm Not Crying is a production of Wildborough Studio. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.